Next up on the Penguin Business Beat is the takeaway. In this segment, an author provides you, the listener, with real advice that you can actually use. In this episode, Alan Deutschman, contributor to Vanity Fair and author of Walk the Walk, the #1 rule for real leaders, tells you how to avoid being a hypocrite.
When I think about the dark side of business these days, of companies that have really failed to live up to their ideals, I think about British Petroleum, or the company that used to call itself British Petroleum, but then had the brilliant idea that the initials BP should stand for Beyond Petroleum. And they did all these big ads saying that their future was all about alternative energy and the things that they were doing to save the world by developing solar and wind and all these clean sources of power. Well, it turns out that BP gets less than 1% of its revenues from these clean alternative energy sources. Overwhelmingly, 99%, it's still a petroleum company. It hasn't come close to going beyond petroleum, and yet they thought that they could fool everyone with this kind of expensive, slick advertising campaign. The reality is no one's fooled, and people see what they really do, which is have gas at gas stations, and except for a few token gestures and expensive advertising, they haven't gone beyond petroleum. Ultimately, I think it's hurt them in many ways that they've made these grossly exaggerated claims, thinking that the rest of us would be easily fooled. The conclusion that I come to in my book, Walk the Walk, is that the reason to walk the walk isn't just because you don't want to look like a hypocrite. The reason is that by actually living up to the highest value that a leader sets for the company, the organization can have a real competitive strength, something that sets it apart from everyone else in its industry, and lets it excel even in hard times, because it has been walking the walk. It has been living up to a special, unique value that other people may only give lip service to, while you actually make it happen. I'm a big foodie, and one of my heroes, and I think a great example of someone who always walks the walk, is Danny Meyer, the founder of the Union Square Cafe in New York City. Meyer started Union Square Cafe when he was a young man in his 20s, and made it the #1 rated restaurant in New York City, an incredibly competitive market, #1 rated in the Zagat survey of restaurant goers. And the way he did this was he was actually there himself on the floor of the restaurant every day for the first 9 years that Union Square Cafe was in business. He would do the things that he needed his people to do. I mean, he would reset tables. He would check coats. He would mop the floor when there was a spill. His personal involvement as a leader there on the front lines, showing his people that he would do everything he needed them to do to create great customer service, helped make Union Square Cafe the most successful restaurant in New York. And Danny Meyer said that he was going to put his employees first, actually, because in that kind of service business, you have to treat your people well for them to be able to treat customers well. And he proved that he really meant it, that he was putting employees first, when he banned smoking in the Union Square Cafe. This was years before smoking became illegal in the restaurants in New York City. But Meyer really wanted to protect the health of his employees, even though some of his best and most loyal customers were big smokers. Meyer said, I'm going to do right by my employees, and It was a very risky, controversial move, and it turned out that even after he banned smoking in the restaurant, it maintained its place as the top-rated restaurant in New York City. I think the big takeaway from Danny Meyer's story at Union Square Cafe is that leaders who walk the walk have to be out there on the front lines. They have to share the struggle with their people. Leadership is not about telling other people what to do. It's being out there among them, seeing things through their eyes, and setting the example, the model that they can follow.